Very warm welcome to another episode of MacTrains. We've got along our usual Chris from Peachy TT120. Thanks, Chris, for coming. But don't worry, it's not just me and Chris again. We have adding some much needed gravitas to the whole situation. We have an esteemed guest and YouTuber extraordinaire, someone you'll probably recognize quite happily, that model railway guy, Joe. So thanks very much for coming along and joining us today.
Yeah,
But
absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on, guys. And yeah, great to be here.
anyone not familiar, I'm sure you all are, but just in case, uh, that Model Railway Guide channel covers all aspects of model railways, from shunting layouts to modular construction, scenics, reviews, to more bespoke material like self-produced foam stone walls and laser cut kits. So a link should be sitting in the description below. Feel free to check it out if you haven't already, and do subscribe to his channel if you also haven't. So we're delighted to have Chris and I have discussed TT120, well, at length, I think it's fair to say, both on and off camera. And we've noticed that you've got involved the last while. Let's just start off with your own initial reaction to the scale. What when it came out, and then what persuaded you to take the plunge?
Yeah, I mean, I think I probably don't have necessarily the sort of answer that you're looking for necessarily here, because when TT was first announced, it wasn't really something that I was immediately grabbed by. I think it was certainly for when Hornby made their announcement, which was I think October of 22. It was just after Getz. I remember that Great Electric Train Show because I was there at the exhibition, and I was talking to Hornby quite a lot, and they said, "Oh, we've got an announcement coming up soon. You'll want to keep an eye out on that." And so when TT came out, I sort of went, "Oh yeah, that's cool. It's really interesting. Nice to see Hornby doing something different." But it wasn't something that immediately grabbed me, mainly because at the time I was halfway through building a double O gauge exhibition layout, and I needed to get that finished because that had a very tight deadline. I'd already taken a bit of a sort of a sidestep into 009 as well for a sort of a small project as well. So I kind of thought, well, that's kind of my secondary scale as it is already. I don't need to add a third one in there. And so really, TT for me was like, I was interested in it because that's part of my job is, to keep sort of a tab on kind of things that are happening within the hobby and yeah, and, to take general interest in these sorts of things. But it wasn't something that I thought, oh, I'm immediately going to rush out and build a layout. However, the complete opposite was true for my dad, who did take an interest in TT. He saw it on, I think it was the Hornby A Model World Series 2, where they featured the sort of the creation of the range in that series, and that really got him interested in. He's never really shown interested in railways or toy trains or model railways or anything like that at any point. I mean, my granddad was very into railways, was a big railway enthusiast. I am as well. With my dad, it somehow skipped a generation. So he's spent most of his life being dragged around to various parts of the country to look at trains. And now for the first time, he was very much sort of like, oh, actually, yeah, this is something that I can do. And it turned out that really it wasn't that he wasn't interested in railways, it's that he'd never really been able to do what he wanted to in the scales that were available. For him, he wants to have a large sort of, well, it's not a huge layout. I mean, it's this layout that I'm building in the process, a bit more on that in a second. But yeah, he was very much sort of like he wanted to be able to run long express trains, have multiple trains whizzing around, have upper levels, tunnels, bridges, shunting yards, all this stuff. And that just wasn't possible to do in the space that he had available. You could equally go, well, N-gauge, you could do all that, but I've tried N-gauge in the past. He's tried N-gauge sort of in the past, and he'd not really got on with it. It was a bit too fiddly for him. And I think really TT was sort of this perfect sort of middle point where he could get quite a lot of what he wanted into a layout, into the space that he had available. And it was done in such a way because it was sort of all Hornby, and I know there's Pico as well with the track as well. But it was very much sort of like it was easy for someone like him who is not a diehard railway enthusiast or doesn't know a huge amount about model railways. He just wants to be able to run some trains around on something that looks relatively nice. And so he ended up getting the Easterner set, I think it was. And soon after he got that, because obviously I do this, he said, can you help me build this layout? And that translates roughly into, will you build the layout for me? So that's why I've ended up doing it all.
You're not just helping him out, but you're actually the one doing the whole thing then.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm doing the whole thing
Did he?
basically.
I like the way your dad's mind works. I can see what he's done there.
My turn.
Go on, Chris.
Oh, a quick question: Did when your dad first got that Eastern set, how did he get on with it as a new person, as you say, someone who has very little experience? How did he get on with that set?
He got on with it better than I was expecting, to be honest. I think the only thing he needed help with was getting the wire from the power from the controller basically to connect onto the track, and he couldn't figure out how to actually connect it up. And I think I had to come in and basically go, no, you just need to be a bit more forceful with it. You just need to push it in, basically. I think he was a bit worried about breaking it. So, but yeah, from what I remember, that was the only real issue. And then, you know, he had his circuit of track, which he had set up. We actually had it. He built this board ready for it, so we actually had the set, you know, the circuit basically set up on this board. It looked very small on here, but it was running around perfectly fine. And so, you know, it wasn't.
Was that DC at that point?
No, that was the analog set. I think it was before the DCC ones came out. This would have been around about January last year. So he's had it a while, and it's only now that I've finished work on the 00 gauge layout, I've basically been able to go, okay, I can start work on your TT layout now. What do you need help with? And he's basically gone everything.
Yeah. So he was an early adopter then.
Yeah, in the grand scheme of things, I think he doesn't think of it that way, because he, you know, TT had been out a few months by that point. It had been, you know, the sort of the Christmas rush period had all been and gone. So I think, you know, it sort of felt like he was a little bit behind the times, but actually in the grand scheme of things now, you know, 18 months down the line from the initial launch, actually he's been there for most of it essentially. And he's, you know, and I think it's what's been interesting to see is how when he originally started off, he was sort of like, oh, well, I think just, you know, 2 or 3 locos will be fine for me. And now he's planning all these other things that he wants to get. And so, you know, the bug has bitten finally. It's, you know.
I've noticed watching your channel that you've gone down the DCC route rather than the HM7000 Bluetooth.
Yeah.
Was that a particular reason, or was it just you always going to go down the DCC?
There were 2 main reasons for it. The first being that we've got a reverse loop on the layout. And as far as I knew, the HM7000 decoders don't work with the standard reverse loop modules that are out there. I know that certainly the one that we've used, which is from Block Signaling, I think, they say specifically it doesn't work with the HM7000. And that's just simply because of, I presume, the power input. It needs to have the DCC sort of power signal for it. We are still, I mean, basically we've got DCC power going to the track, but the vast majority of the locos are run using the HM7000 app. So they're still on Bluetooth control. They're just taking in DCC power rather than just straight from a transformer, so to speak. Right. There's also the we've got the Class 08 as well, which we I don't know if they're out, but we don't have a 6-pin decoder for the 08. So in order to be able to run that, we've got the DCC for that essentially. And it was just kind of a future-proofing thing as well. Like we knew that if for whatever reason we decided not to go down, bearing in mind neither of us had tried HM7000 before we'd started this project. We didn't know how we were going to get on with it. We didn't know whether we were going to like it. I've got quite extensive experience with the Roku Z21 system, which also works from your phone. Not Bluetooth, of course, but it's traditional DCC, but with control on your phone. And I'm very used to using that kind of app. And so I wasn't sure how I was going to, be able to translate to the HM7000 app, to the Hornby app. And so I think, and also I was aware that, he wasn't necessarily used to controlling trains. He might have preferred to have a physical knob. And so, I think it was just for us as well. It was about future-proofing things so that we could kind of go, okay, well, if we design it around having a DCC controller at the center, and then we can still have the option of running with HM7000 if we want to, or we have the it's the option of we can do it with or without, basically. And so it leaves us open, so we're not tied to the one system. But for what I will say, for the most part, the trains are run using the HM7000 app. It's only the O8 at the moment that isn't, and it's a bit annoying actually to have to switch to a different sort of controller thing. So yeah, hopefully when we get the 6-pin decoders, we'll get one in there as well. So yeah.
Yeah,
We're all waiting for the 6 pins to come out, aren't you, Chris?
yeah, I think November. I think. Yeah, I'm fed up of paying for this way works next holiday by having him convert my put 8 pins inside my O8.
Oh yes, yeah, hardwiring them all in.
Yeah.
Yes. That
You-
I might
you-
try that in the future. I have not got the time at the moment because I've got to get this layout finished for September. So
Right.
Brilliant. Then just you've effectively had HM7000 and TT then as things that have come on together at the same time for you on stream. What's your overall your negatives, your positives so far, particularly on TT120, but with your experience of HM7000 as well? Two new things.
yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of part of what I alluded to with my dad earlier on, in that I think as far as the pros go, it's the biggest one obviously is that it's smaller than double O gauge, but I don't want to say less fiddly, but it's more user friendly, I feel like, than N gauge. And I say that as somebody who has worked in N gauge in the past, and I do feel that N gauge. This is not me saying that you can't build layouts in N gauge at all. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. Before everybody jumps on me in the comments, but it's more of that. It's that sense of, if you want things to run well and run consistently, N gauge is a lot more work, and some people love that. Some people love tinkering with things and fiddling and getting things right and sort of perfecting things. That's not my dad. He wants to be able to switch the train set on and have trains bombing around immediately. And I feel like that's kind of who Hornby are marketing TT towards. It's not necessarily for diehard railway enthusiasts who want absolutely everything to be perfect and to be able to model every kind of niche. It's more for that kind of train set user, but almost, and I say train set user, and I'm sure some people will kind of like jump on that as well as being a bit sort of like, oh, it's not a train set, it's a model railway, and it's, yeah, I know, I get it, but there are people who are more casual with the whole kind of thing, and I think it is just that sense of, for people, for want of a better word, who are train set users who want a sort of a high standard of kind of things. That's where I really, they just want it to work. And I think that's the good thing with HM7000 as well, is that it's one of those systems where, so many people now are used to using their phones for everything. It kind of makes sense to have, the connection there with the phone being your controller. I think the Bluetooth thing works really well as well. Again, it's more options and stuff for that. There are obviously cons to TT120 and to HM7000 as well. I think certainly with HM7000, it's had a little bit of a rocky start, just with some people, getting used to the system, I think, as much as everything else. And, there have been little issues with the app where people have, had to struggle to download certain sound profiles or anything like that. But that generally seems to, as the months go on, it seems that that's getting stronger and stronger as they continue to work on it. And I think that's just kind of what we expect with this sort of thing. Obviously, the big con with TT120 is, and it's a pretty obvious one when you think about it, is it's not a huge range. It's still a brand new scale. There's not a lot to look at the moment. If you want to be able to model Lancashire and Yorkshire pre-grouping line, that's not really possible at the moment. But there are certain things that you can do. So if you want to model something very, very specific, a specific era, time, place, whatever, TT120 probably isn't going to be right for you, unless, of course, now that we've got the Class 50s out as well, you could say that actually with the Class 08, the BR Blue 50 and the BR Blue and Yellow HST, you've actually got the nice sort of setting of a sort of diesel kind of style layout there. You get an extra HST set perhaps, and renumber one of them if you feel like it, and there you've got a really great sort of basis of a layout, especially with the Mark IIs that have just turned up as well, if you get some of those in blue and gray. So we are starting to get there, but obviously the major issue at the moment is that if you want to be able to model something very specific that Hornby haven't made yet, well, you're kind of relying on that. If you want to model GWR, for example, that's not an option at the moment. Like, the most you can do is basically an empty station with Pico's kits. That's kind of it. So, So yeah, and I think as well, there is also the situation as well where it isn't available in model shops as widely as it is with as widely as double O or N or some of the other scales are available, and it's not as visible at exhibitions as well. So it's harder to get people to sort of see the scale and kind of experience it for themselves. There are cons to TT, but I think a lot of them you can kind of explain away, and not necessarily wanting to make excuses, but when you actually start to look at who I think the range is sort of aimed at, you can see why some of those cons actually start to make a little bit more sense, or why they're not so much of an issue as may first appear.
Very good. Yeah, I think we'd agree with a lot of that. Chris and I, spoken about the limitations of the range. You can't suddenly duplicate a double O range in one manufacturer doing it from scratch. It's simply not possible. And in 5 years' time, that may be quite different. But right now, you've got to work with what's coming out. And we're thankful that ARCA this last few months has been certainly quite a little flurry of things that have kept our interests peaked and our bank balances low.
It's kept me off building my layout. So yeah. I seem to be constantly doing reviews.
It's about time you got back to that. Anyway, you're just sitting there doing nothing all the time, Chris. Right. That takes us on, I think, to maybe just a quick thing of favorite TT loco so far for both of you.
Oh, class 50.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with that. I think it may just be because it's the one that's turned up most recently, and because I've had great fun having it run around the layout. But yeah, I do. I'm not normally a big diesel sort of person. My general preference is usually small industrial steam engines, and to have the sort of the class 50 actually blow me away as it has, I think is actually pretty impressive for not only the job that Hornby has done with that particular model, but the scale as a whole, because I actually start to see more of what you can do with TT and how that's different from other scales. So I think that's, that and I think before the 50 came out, I probably would have said the HST. But yeah, now I think actually it's the 50 because it looks great. It sounds great. It's a fantastic runner.
It works. It's got some weight to it. It's nearly 200 grams. It's got 6 driving wheels. It's got a decent 5-pole motor. It's got some torque. It can pull, and it's a stunning actual model. So I know there's been a few issues where someone somewhere on the production line has, when they've installed the flywheels, which also double up as the coupling for the drive shafts, have put them on maybe a mil or two too much. And with an experienced model like us, we'll be able to tweak them out, and you're fine. Your drive shafts are fine. But there are a lot of, going back to those new people, who are finding their drive shafts in the middle of the track because it's fallen out, because someone somewhere in manufacturing hasn't quite followed the tolerances correctly. But again, these are things that they've been reported back to Hornby. Hornby, I can only assume, are communicating with the manufacturers and saying, right, you need to sharpen up on this stuff because we're getting returns. But that's the way with these new things and dealing with new manufacturers as well, I guess.
I think the risk of the 50 is that it is the newest one. So you'd always got that the latest thing is your best. But I would have said the 50 as well, I must be honest. I think what is encouraging is that I think the locos generally are getting better with each release. I think that indicates that Hornby are getting more experience, that they're getting more finesse, and that the manufacturing is getting better. There still can be issues, but I had it here that we test because it is so heavy and so powerful, and I just angled my module board to see what angle I sat the level on my phone on to give it, and you got to 2 degrees, no problem at all, 3 degrees, no problem. It hit 8 degrees. And it would still just about go pulling one coach. Now, 2 was too much for at 8 degrees, but it would pull a coach at 8 degrees, which is incredible. It's the kind of thing as a kid, you always thought, why can't I do this? But now you realize that's just insane,
That's exactly what I was thinking when you were saying that. It reminded me of you telling me about what you tried to do with that Ginty when you were a boy.
Oh no, I was just going to sort of on that going back to the 50 as well is that anybody who's been keeping up with my layout build series will know I've recently put an incline on the layout, and that for some of the earlier steam locos I've had to use the DCC Concepts power base on that in order to get some of the locos up there with the trains required. The 50, no problem at all because of that weight, because of that power. It's had, I think, it's had at least 4 coaches up there without any problems at all. It might even have done 5 at one point as well. So, you know, I think it does come back to that thing of what you're saying. Like every loco from Hornby so far has been an improvement over the last one, and I think it is that they're getting used to working in a smaller scale, and gradually things are getting better. We've already heard about how they've, you know, improved things for the LMS locos that are coming up as well. So, you know, they're learning all the time. And, you know, what I think is great about
it's heavier than the 50.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's the thing is that it's Hornby are learning and they're willing to make those adjustments and go, okay, we're not just going to repeat what we did last time out, but with a different body shell or a different chassis or whatever. We actually are going to make meaningful improvements over time as we learn things. And I think that's the sort of new mentality that I think we haven't seen from Hornby necessarily consistently for a while. And so it's great to see that happening with TT, and I think we'll start to see that happening if we aren't already seeing it happen with double O gauge as well.
And if you can do something with the finesse and tolerance of TT, it becomes so much easier then to go and do it double O. So hopefully it should be that each thing learned improves the whole range. But if we offer you an instant promotion there, Joe, and you're no longer a humble YouTuber, you're the boss of Hornby Towers, what will you do next with TT?
That is a really good question. And I think possibly the way to start off with this is actually by saying, I think that what Hornby are doing already is actually the sort of the rough plan that they've kind of shared with us already is actually pretty good. Being realistic, I probably wouldn't change all that much. I know, you know, obviously they're focusing very much on the LNER and that kind of eastern region. I think that makes sense because they've got, you know, they've already got the A4 and the A3. Having the J50 coming along, hopefully later this year, will sort of strengthen that. And it makes more sense to kind of focus in on one area rather than spreading it all out too thin. So actually from that kind of basis, and, you know, like I say, we've got the 50 that works with the HST and the 08, as we've kind of already said. I think there is a sort of a joined up thinking there, and it's not necessarily going to please everybody, but I can see the logic behind Hornby's plan, and I can see why they're doing it. And I think you know, being realistic, I think that's really good. If money were no object, if we could say whatever we wanted and, you know, it could happen. I mean, I do think that after the J50 is done, it would be, if it were me, I would get to work on doing the J94 austerity straight away. Because of that, I think because it ties into that LNER thing, it would then give you 2 big LNER locos and 2 small LNER locos. But you've also, with the austerity, you've got the British Railways liveries that you can do with it as well. But you can also do all the pretty colourful industrial liveries as well. So I think it was EFE who did the austerity in N-Gauge last year, I want to say. And some of those look fantastic. Like they're really beautiful looking locos with all the liveries that have got on there. And so I think, you know, given how widespread that could be, I mean, you can have an austerity pretty much anywhere. You know, you can have a you know, any kind of railway and just sort of put an industrial tank engine in the siding somewhere, just going, well, yeah, well, that just works here and does whatever. And, you know, so I think there could be an argument for that. Alternatively, and I've got so many different my brain is going in all different, you know, it's firing on all cylinders and going in all different directions. You could equally say that, well, we've got a big LNER loco and we've got a small LNER loco with the J50. How about something in the middle? Yeah, have a J15 or something, because we know that they've got the CADs and the tooling for the double O gauge model. So, you know, maybe they can do what they've done with the J50, which was from around a kind of similar time. And then that gives us sort of a small 060 tender engine. I mean, I'm a sucker for an 060 tender engine. Anyone who's watched my channel will know that straight away. So I think, you know, that could be you know, you've then got a kind of a middle size there. Equally, to go in a completely different direction, you could say, well, Pico have brought out all their Great Western stuff, but there's no locos, or I think there's maybe some kit rolling stock out there somewhere, but there's nothing really, you can't really, I don't feel like you can really build a Great Western layout at the moment. So if I were Hornby, then maybe you'd sort of go, well, can we fill that market? Can we fill that gap and go, here's a load of stuff? But there's obviously all the thing of, is somebody else working on that? Does Pico know something? Alternatively, you could also say, well, we've got the J50 for the LNER. How about the Ginty for the LMS? So, I think there are so many different ways that you could go with it. And I think that really, in some ways, is what's so exciting about TT at the moment, is that they really could go in lots of different directions, and it's keeping us all guessing. And it's not going to make everybody happy. It's going to sort of, for everybody everybody who goes, oh yeah, that's fantastic, I really want one of those, there's going to be other people who go, oh, I wish I'd have done this instead. That's kind of just the nature of the game in a way. But I think that's kind of really what's exciting about TT at the moment, is that there is so much possibility with it. There's so much they could do. Even there, I'm leaning heavily towards my own sort of steam bias. I haven't even really spoken about diesel or electric or multiple units or anything like that as well. So, there is so much that you could do with it. And I think, yeah, like I say, that's just what's really exciting about the scale going forward for the next few years. Because really, after the end of this year, we don't know what's happening. We know that the 37 is going to come at some point, but we don't know if there's going to be anything released next year. We hope that there might be something that's going to come out at some point, but Hornby have kind of indicated that they're going to try and cut down, that they announced something and it's going to arrive, within the sort of next 6 to 12 months after that. So, hopefully we won't be left on the shelf for another year. Hopefully there will be some extra bits and pieces that come out as a result of this. But yeah, I think, like I said, I think it's so exciting that there are so many different ways they could go. I don't know if that really answers your question. I've just sort of given you a wish list of what I would do, but I guess that's kind of
that's fine.
The question.
That's it. People just want to have a bit of nice. Well, I want to hear your thoughts, off script, and that's absolutely fine. Me personally, if I was in charge, I would turn around and say, right, okay, what I want is, as you say, a middle-sized loco, maybe like an A5 or an A8, or a Prairie if it was going to be. A Prairie if it was going to be to Great Western, something that could shunt but also pull coaches, and was all over British Railways in era 4 and 5, and so would have been. So you can have them all over the country within a set. Okay, it depends on how focused you want to be but you've got stock. They can already be pulling. And you can be shunting backwards and forwards, and you can actually pull. And I think and also you'd be able to get an 8-pin in there, and you'd be able to have sound in there. Whereas the 8-pin and sound, the only way you're getting them into a J50 at the moment is if people like me or Richard This Way Works take one apart and grinds away, because the manufacturing cost is going to be too expensive to have someone make something that. Or the only alternative is they actually do manage to get a 6-pin Bluetooth to control the speaker, but who knows? My gut feeling though is just from the feedback I'm getting from all the people that I've been speaking to, including Martin Weaver at Hornby, is that the majority of their new customers are people who don't have memories of steam trains. They have memories of era 7, era 8 and above, and they're the people coming on board, and that's why the HST's flown through the roof. That's why the Class 50 is flown off the shelves. And the next thing they do that hits that middle ground of, I don't know, 1980 to 2010, that's also going to be a big seller. If I had to choose something that was modern, I would say I want a Eurostar. And I would be thinking that, and I know there's a number of my German and Dutch subscribers keep banging me on about it, saying, "Chris, go round to Martin Weaver's house." So I don't know where he lives.
I think for me, if I was looking to steam a diesel, rather, to me, a class 25 would be quite a good shout. Partly because a lot of the folk that are coming on to TT are ones who have some memories of stuff, and the 25 was almost ubiquitous in Hornby in the 80s. their 25 was everywhere. Everyone had a 20. If you had a train set, you had a 25 virtually, and they were reliable little models because they were just bobos rather than cocos. They tended not to derail very much, tend to be very steady on the rails. And I think that and TT could actually be a good move. In terms of the slightly more strategic thinking rather than just what would I like next for just everything now. And this is a bit more left field. I do wonder in terms of how these things work with getting the rights and so on. I don't know, but I suspect the rights for some of these things are tied to a certain scale. And I think Hornby could reapproach and try to get the rights for Thomas and Friends at TT. That to me, I wouldn't buy it at all.
Neither would I.
But I think in terms of trying to grow the scale and get people into it from younger days, that might actually be a starting point. Because a few folk have asked about railroad and TT, and that's not going to work because there's so much investment in new tooling, so much finesse required. To see why that's not happening for 10 years anyway until they start doing the ones that are out now and rebadging them perhaps as older stuff. But you don't have much detail, just start little Thomas models that don't require a vast amount of finesse in the producing of them, which is a lot of the cost for TT. Colourful, bright, small, reliable, and just get them out. And that, I think, would allow an avenue into TT for people that there maybe isn't just now. So I'm thinking, not thinking of what I would want. I'm thinking of what, if I was a boss of Hornby, strategically, how would I look to grow this further? And because they don't have Thomas for 00, and they're not likely to get it anytime soon, they may be able to get it.
I'm glad you're not in charge.
I'm sure that a lot of people would echo that. They're all saying, so say all of us.
I think the key thing with that, if they were to look into the key thing, I think would be the licensing costs, really, because I think that's sort of, from my understanding, at least anyway, was one of the reasons why Hornby kind of let all that stuff go, along with the kind of the Harry Potter stuff that they used to do and a lot of the other Warner Brothers tie-ins that they had. So I would imagine that having let it go so soon, they wouldn't necessarily be trying to go down that route again quite so quickly. But I can absolutely see where you're coming from that point, because it would work really well, especially for kids layouts where, you know, they do want lots of sort of features in a very small space. But again, kind of going back to what I was talking about earlier with Engage being a little bit too small, perhaps TT could be that perfect middle ground. So, you know, you could fit a lot into a kid's bedroom without it having to be, you know, a big 6 foot by 4 foot board with the only manages to get a couple of circuits on and a station. And, you know, in that sort of space with TT, there's a lot more options. And so that could be a very attractive sort of proposition for kids, for families as well. But yeah, and as well, I don't know if you guys have heard this, but I mean, I've heard from a lot of people who it's the parents, usually the dad, who has sort of, you know, has taken an interest in the kind of thing, but it's become a family kind of thing with the kids being able to get involved as well. And it's, although we've kind of always had that with Hornby, has kind of always sort of, you know, marketed slightly towards a more train set style audience than the other manufacturers have, because Hornby are one of the few manufacturers that do make train sets in, you know, in both TT now, but also 00 gauge, which they have done for years as well. And so it's been interesting to see that, you know, a lot of the people who have been coming into TT are kind of that demographic. So yeah, having an engine that, you know, oh, you know, little so-and-so can have his engine, his Thomas engine that he runs on the layout when, you know, when dad's playing with the train set as well. That, you know, that could be a potentially really good option for them. So yeah, that's not something that I'd considered, but actually it's, you know, the more you think about it, I can see the reasoning behind it and how that could actually work really, really well.
So Chris is too dismissive, you see. We need to have more positive folk like yourself. He's always that misery guts over there in Yorkshire.
Listen, no, I think Joe's absolutely hit the nail on the head. A small, a Ginty or whatever, little 040 set, I think would be perfect. And I think it would be a really good idea if they get the 6 pins fixed. But yeah. I think that if I was in that business, I wouldn't be chasing after Warner Brothers or anyone else to put stickers like, or Coca-Cola or whoever. I don't think it's really needed. I'm not even sure if it's something that's valued at all anymore. It's quite niche. But then again, we don't know. We don't know what the figures are. I don't know how much money they made out of those Beatles wagons. There will be some people who like the Beatles who bought them. There'll be some mums who bought them without any better knowledge, from the bottom of their heart, thinking they were buying something nice. But it certainly wasn't me buying them.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's also a case of I personally was of the opinion until a few months ago that Thomas wasn't really that popular that much anymore. And then the Heritage Railway, where I volunteer, we did a few days out with Thomas, and they were absolutely packed. And clearly, people are still, kids are still interested in Thomas. I very much thought it had fallen off, but apparently that's not the case at all. It's still very much a thing that people are interested in. So, yeah, who knows? You never know.
I mean, these wooden brio trains, that kids have at the bottom, 2-3-year-olds. These things are what give them that first grab into the idea of, to run their set whatever they like, and it's so robust. And I suppose Hornby had been various attempts, I think, with their play trains and whatnot, and Hornby Junior, to try and make the next step up from that, with varying levels of success, definitely. Right then, one thing that both Chris and I genuinely appreciated, I think, Joe, was when you did a kind of piece to camera a month or so back, giving a response to some of the negativity that there's been, particularly directed towards TT, which Chris and I've constantly been a wee bit baffled by the negativity. Sorry.
And battered.
And battered at times, yeah. So what was that made you decide, yeah, I'm actually going to do this. I'm going to do a whole episode almost on facing these questions, rather than just that's life and get over it and just ignore it. You actually did speak.
Yeah, I think it's partly from what Chris kind of said there, of there is that, why are you so upset about it? And I think for me, it was really very much trying to drill down into the concerns that people have and sort of look at them one by one and kind of go, okay, I can see why this is a valid concern. What I can understand why people might be worried about this. But then actually, once you start to deconstruct things, you sort of go, okay, well, is it really that much of an issue? And I think then the whole kind of thing with that particular video as well, that I really sort of came to at the end of it, was it's just a hobby. Like, it's meant to be fun. This is the, with all those sort of sit down sort of talking videos, and there's been a lot of people, in the last sort of year or so, there's been a lot of people who do kind of discussion videos where they sit down and they have a rant and a rave about something, and and they get loads of views because it's kind of clickbait, and that kind of negativity is sort of it feeds off itself almost, and there's it allows that kind of that loud minority to really sort of kind of have a platform, I guess, in a way. And I think for me, it was, I kind of knew I was going to draw the fire from doing from having done a 00 gauge series to then doing a TT layout build series. I knew there was going to be some people who weren't going to like that. And I think my whole kind of, when I've had comments and people sort of contacting me about that sort of, sort of saying, oh, why are you doing TT? It's a waste of time, or it's rubbish, or whatever. I've always kind of gone, well, the techniques and the stuff that I'm doing is the same for pretty much any scale. Like, even if you're not going to model in TT yourself, you can still potentially learn something or get ideas for other things that you're going to do, or even just find it interesting. And I make the comparison that when I did a 009 series where I built a 009 layout in a suitcase, I didn't have a load of people contacting me then saying, why are you doing 009? It's ridiculous. And so I think it was trying to, I think for me, I didn't want to just sort of dismiss people's kind of fears and worries and anxieties about it, but I also kind of wanted to go, is this really something we need to worry about? Because it is just that case of, like, by breaking down each kind of point, and I won't go into each one here because obviously I've done a whole video on that, and people can go and watch that if they really have nothing to do with their afternoons. But it's it is that kind of thing of just sort of like the vast majority of it comes down to, this is a hobby. We do this for enjoyment. We do this for fun. This isn't something that we should be getting stressed about, that we should be getting worked up about, that we should be getting angry about. But at the end of the day, I know I spoke earlier about, calling things train sets and upsetting people with that. But at the end of the day, these are toy trains that we run around on little bits of board, and, we have fun with them. And, you kind of have to take that step back and kind of go, is it really worth your time? I say this as the person who is getting worked up about something. Is it really worth your time to get that worked up about something, to spend that time being frustrated, being angry? Put that time into building your own model railway, into, building a kit, or into, I don't know, learning a new scenic thing. Like, I think that's the thing, is it's, if there's an aspect of the hobby that you don't like, even if you really genuinely, for some bizarre reason, hate TT120 with an absolute passion, which I don't understand why you would have that. But even if you do, just ignore it. Like, that's the thing, is that it just comes down to, okay, so you don't like it, but you don't need to constantly seek it out. And that was the thing, is I had a lot of comments on that video from people who were seeking out the negativity. And I think that's the thing. And we see this online all the time. There are, sorry?
Part of the online reality, sadly, isn't it, that people do feel it more free just to rant off online. And we've all fallen into that to some extent, I think, at times. It's difficult to get across. There's something about human interaction that's genuinely face to face, that's different from digital interaction. Even like this over a video platform, there's still something different about actual physical human interaction, that you get to know somebody, you get to pick up on physical cues, on tone, that can't get in an email, can't get in a comment section. So I think you've hit the nail on the head there. If you don't like it, don't watch it. Don't let your heart rate race away on you by feeling you've got to hit the keyboard.
I've got one little theory, and it's only a little one, that some of that kind of, like, I don't know, anger or hate came from the fact that Simon Kohler was so involved in TT120 coming back. And I don't know why he's such a Marmite fella. There's lots of people who really dislike him, or really disliked his business premises. And that's for them to work through. But I think if, no one was getting all angry and cross when Hellion were talking about it. No one was getting angry and cross when Pico were talking about it. And if Hornby hadn't come along, I think it would have been I don't think it would have been as successful, but I think it would have been a little niche thing that no one was bothered about. But all of a sudden, Hornby's involved in it, and it sparks something in people. It flicks a switch. I don't know what that switch is. I don't have it.
Maybe I think in the settings, if you go into settings on the HM 7000 app, you'll find it there on function 24.
Angry.
Yeah, I think it absolutely is that thing of, there is a certain amount of sort of almost prejudice against Hornby in a way. And I think it's one of those things where that's kind of the price they have to pay for being the most popular manufacturer. And there may be some people who disagree with them being the most popular manufacturer, but, look at the amount of reach they have in comparison. I mean, Hornby is still a household name. When I tell people what I do, when I talk about this channel with people who have no idea, I say, oh, I do stuff with model railways, and they go, oh, Hornby. And it's like, that's people, for a lot of people, Hornby equals model railways, or rather model railways equals Hornby. Get it the right way around. But it's that thing of, I think that, Hornby is still very, very popular. And as a result, that means that your negative fan base, that doesn't really make sense. But the amount of people who have sort of a grievance with the company then increases, drastically as well. And yeah, I think it is what you sort of say, that nobody really kind of cared about TT when it was just Pico and Hellion and everything. It was kind of like, oh yeah, this is a thing that they're doing. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but best of luck to them or whatever. I maybe not going to be interested in it, but we'll see. There might be some people who do it, and as soon as Hornby comes along, the floodgates open. Every so often, people find something with Hornby to latch onto, and they grab hold of that, and then they blow it way out of proportion. And that's not to say that Hornby are completely blameless in every situation, but I do think that there are. I think Hornby gets a lot more stick than if another manufacturer had done the same thing. If another manufacturer had gone into TT in the way that Hornby have, I don't think that people would have reacted in the same way. If, say, a Curascale had done it, a Curascale are almost sort of like they're very highly regarded in the hobby at the moment, and and it is that sort of thing where it's just sort of like if they had gone into TT in the same way that Hornby have done, back in 2022. I think the arguments would have been very, very different if there even would have been any arguments at all. So yeah.
Good question, Joe. Do you think that might have something to do with the fact that let's play some what ifs? If a Curascale, and Richard will probably have a go at me next time I see him about this, but if a Curascale had done that, okay, then they would have produced some brilliant models. They would have produced some fantastic kit, as they do, and there would be lots of people in the model railway kind of community who may have gone, well, actually, I'll give that a go. But that's not what Hornby's done. Hornby have brought some wonderful kit out, but they've gone out and brought a whole bunch of new people in. And I don't know if the Curascale's name is big enough outside of our world to do that. And that's not to be derogatory towards a Curascale, but they don't have that Argos name where you have a Hornby Christmas set. That, like as you say, it's synonymous with modern railways out there in the rest of the world. So, and if they had done that, we might have been talking about some of the issues some people have had, which is about whether or not it means that we're taking hobbyists away from other scales. And I think if Curasco had done that, maybe we would have been cannibalizing and would have been taking a business away from other bits of the industry. Whereas for Martin, I think I've met Martin Weaver a few times now. He comes across as a complete breath of fresh air, and I like the way he goes about his business, or seems to go about his business. And I think he's been quite upfront and honest with everyone so far, and he's saying that his figures don't show that they're cannibalizing their double O market. They're showing that they're bringing in new people.
Yeah, and I mean, I think obviously a Curascale haven't gone into, or any other manufacturer haven't gone into TT120 in the same way that Hornby have. I don't think it would work for any other manufacturer to be able to do that, because like you say, they don't have the reach, they don't have that household name sort of status. And so, like you say, it is because Hornby are bringing in more new people to the hobby. Out of all the people that I know, I don't think I know of many of anyone who has actually gone personally. I'm sure there is somebody out there, but I don't think I know of a person who has an established double O gauge or any other scale kind of collection who has seen TT and gone, yep, I'm going to go all in on that. The vast majority of people that I know are getting into TT120 are people like my dad, who have never had a layout before, but who fancy the idea of it. Like you say, yeah, it's bringing in new people. It's bringing in a new generation of modelers as well. Like I think a lot of people are sort of generally tend to be a bit younger. Again, as we were sort of talking about with the sort of the 70s and 80s era diesel kind of stuff as well. I think it is very much a kind of situation that, what other scale can you say has brought in this amount of people to the hobby in such a short amount of time? I mean, I know that Bachmann's NG7 thing that they've just started up isn't completely new. I know that that's kind of got the existing sort of 16.5 kind of thing behind it. But I don't think in, say, 18 months' time, for a start, I don't think they're probably going to have the range that Hornby have in, a similar size range that Hornby have in TT currently in 18 months' time. And also, I don't think that NG7 is going to bring the same amount of new modelers into building a model railway. That's obviously because Bachmann and Hornby are going after very different markets. They're aimed at very different people. But like I said, to bring this all kind of back to what you were saying, it is because Hornby are more of that household name. It's because they have a wider reach, and because they are going for more of that sort of casual kind of audience, rather than somebody who really wants to build a very specific layout of some LNER station in the 1950s and 1960s, and that's they want every detail to be right.
You'll probably know this. You'll probably know this from the fact that I know you speak to people when you go to shows, and I've been canvassing opinions from manufacturers, and there are companies out there who are singing the same song now. The people like, I don't know, example, Western Wagon Works. They're saying they've got a whole people who are buying TT120 are newbies. They're new to everything, and their sales are doing really good. Their TT120 sales are now outstripped their O gauge sales, and they're snapping on the heels of their N gauge, and it has exploded for them. And I think people are becoming aware of it, and I think there are exciting times over the next 2 or 3 years. I mean, obviously these things take time to develop, and nobody really wants to put themselves in this situation where they say they're going to do something and then we get bored waiting to hear, so I think that in 2 or 3 years' time, there's going to be some exciting stuff coming.
So let's in that 2 or 3 years' time. I think that's quite astute analysis. Actually, I think that you're right. Only Hornby really could do what's been done with TT120 to bring it to anything like a wider consciousness. Only Hornby in the UK, at least, was able to do that. They have done that. They're bringing stuff out. They've got a good range. It's early days. 2 or 3 years' time, yes or no? Are there going to be other manufacturers on the bandwagon by that point, beyond your Westall Wagon Works and so on? Are there going to be Accurascale, Rapido, Bachmann, Drepol? What do you think?
I have to be very careful about what I say here, because I have NDAs with certain companies, and so I've had discussions about this, and I don't want to say anything that will give people an idea one way or the other, in case I accident, because I don't even want to say I can't say anything on the basis of people then saying, oh, well, he can't say anything, somebody must be working on it. It's literally completely neutral. So
yes, maybe, and no is the answer to that question.
Well,
yeah, I think it's.
I've not signed any NDAs yet.
I think for me, though, it is one of those things where, from a personal point of view, I would love to see some other manufacturers get into the scale. I think it's one of those situations where a lot of manufacturers are keeping an eye on how things go. It's certainly not completely ruled out, but I think there's not many manufacturers who are, obviously because nobody has jumped on the bandwagon as of yet, that we know that are sort of like, oh yeah, we're absolutely going to jump on this. Otherwise, when Helion first made their announcement, we would have seen other manufacturers doing something similar as well. But from a personal point of view, yeah, I would absolutely love to see more manufacturers enter the scale. I'm often I think having more choice is a great thing. And that comes sort of, that you can look at that from the point of view as individual models of kind of going, even if you get duplication between different models, which, okay, in a scale like TT120 where there's very little available, duplication would probably not be the best thing at the moment. But at least then you have 2 different versions to kind of go, okay, where are you going to spend your money? Because it's probably only going to be people like us who go, well, I'm going to get one of the Hornby version and one of the manufacturer X version. I think
Sorry, could you intercept for a second? When they have such small manufacturing batches, does it matter? Because if they go, okay, so let's say someone does make another one, another 37, and we've got have sold their 500, but actually everyone's buying the other person's slot of 537s that have been produced. Well, when we go, well, all right, well, we won't reproduce that one. We'll go on to the next model. We won't reorder that one, and so I think manufacturers are a lot more flexible.
Yeah, and like I say, I think it does come back down to having that choice is a good thing for the modelers and for people like us as well, where it's like, if a manufacturer prices a loco a bit higher than somebody else's, but they're detail is better, then it's interesting to see where the market goes, and it gives people that option. Similarly, you can say that doesn't necessarily even have to be a straight duplication of a loco. You could just say, if another manufacturer were to come along with a really highly detailed, even more so detailed than Hornby's TT range, but a significantly higher price because of, say, lower runs and whatever, would people still stick with Hornby? Would there be more interested in that? It would be interesting to see where the market goes. But then even opening that out to all the scales, I think having more choice in scales is a good thing as well. And I think that kind of sort of neatly almost encompasses my whole kind of sort of thinking with TT, is that we've got 00 gauge, we've got N, we've got O, we've got 009, we've got all these different scales. The more stuff that we have available, it's fantastic to see where the hobby is at the moment, that we've got all these options that you can pick and choose from, all these little bits and pieces, and that it's not now that if you want to model a specific thing you have to work in one particular scale. There are often lots of options. I mean, if you want a terrier on your layout, you can choose from three at least. I mean, there's 00, there's a couple of them in 00, there's an O gauge one, and there's an N gauge one as well. So you're not only now limited to choice between different manufacturers or whatever, but it's having that option between different scales and stuff. And so I think it is that case of the more options we have, the luckier we kind of are as hobbyists, to have a hobby in that sort of sense that, is able to support this. And I think, there was that initial concern that the hobby wouldn't be able to support TT, that it would cannibalize other things. But actually, as we've said, we've not really seen that. We've seen that it's brought new people into model railways, which is always a good thing, because we're always talking about how we want people to join the hobby. And I think it's that thing of it's allowed some people to expand into other areas, or just to it gives us something else to talk about as well. Like from a cynical point of view, like from making a YouTube channel, like it gives me something like I can go, oh, I can focus on this for a bit, and that's an interesting thing, and it's something that's a bit different that perhaps a few people won't necessarily. I think a lot of people don't necessarily have experience with TT120 at the moment, and so hopefully by the stuff that I do on my channel, they can kind of get a bit more of a sense of what is possible with it. I mean, I know I've had several comments talking about the amount of stuff that we've managed to fit onto the 8-foot by 2.5-foot board. That I mean, we've got 2 circuits, we've got a reverse loop, we've got an upper level with an incline and a terminus station and tunnels and shunting yards and all sorts of stuff. And it's I think people are now starting to see what is possible with the scale, and it then allows people to kind of go, oh, okay, is this the best way for me to go? Is another scale better? But having those options and being able to choose between the different things, I think that's really helpful. And I think overall, I think it's a positive thing to have those options. The benefits outweigh the negatives in that sense. So yeah.
Well, thank you very much for watching, and thank you to Chris and to Joe for joining me today. That has gone by very quickly. I've thoroughly enjoyed getting to know what's going on for That Model Railway Guy. As I say, please do keep an eye on this channel, subscribe. Likewise, Peachy TT120. There's loads of content there, more to come. This is just beginning. Thanks for your time.